Which religion did Jesus follow? Few people think to ask this question because they assume that I grew up as a Jew and then became a Christian. Yet this is not the case. In reality, I did not see myself as belonging to any formal or outer religion. I was, and I still am, a follower of the universal religion of God, and I belong to the living inner church of God. I am not thereby saying that there is anything wrong with outer religions or outer churches. Not every human being is ready to follow the inner path. Therefore, many people need an outer organization that can gradually lead them to discover the inner mysteries of God. Yet God's intention behind inspiring an outer religion is that people will use it only as a stepping stone. The outer religion and its doctrines must never become a mental prison that traps your mind. In other words, an outer religion is meant to help you discover the true inner religion. The true inner religion is a universal religion. To understand this, you must realize that in heaven there are no divisions. You can ascend to heaven only when you realize that everything and everyone is created from God's substance. Through this realization, you clearly see that everything originated from the same source. Therefore, individual differences are not seen as the source of division and conflict. In heaven, we are all one. The divisions found on earth did not come from God. They came from the death consciousness and its relativity and sense of separation. The death consciousness cannot see unity behind diversity. Therefore, to the human ego, differences must inevitably lead to division and conflict. To the death consciousness, differences are also the source of a value judgment. In other words, the death consciousness always seeks to determine that one person is better than another person or that one church is better than another church. Because of people's identification with the death consciousness, people have a desire to define one church as being the only true church. From God's viewpoint, this is a completely false and unnecessary desire. In reality, a true church is the church that leads people to discover the inner path of Christhood. In reality, many of the churches found on earth have qualified as true churches. Unfortunately, some of them qualified only in their early stages, and they were later perverted and used in the eternal human power struggle. Nevertheless, it is essential for you to realize that the idea of one true church simply did not come from God. There are no Catholics, Jews, Protestants, Buddhists, Muslims, or Taoists in heaven. In heaven, you find only sons and daughters of God because once you are here, it really doesn't matter which path you follow to get here. Once you step through the straight and narrow gate, you leave all the outer human divisions behind. Or perhaps I should say that before you can step through the narrow gate, you must voluntarily leave all human divisions behind. I am a Christian mystic. For the past 2,000 years, some people have had the courage to go beyond the doctrines defined by the Orthodox Church. These people have often been labeled as the Christian mystics. If I had to put a label on myself, I would use the term mystic. I was a student of the mysteries of God. I am still a student of the mysteries of God. I desire you to know that while I was in physical embodiment, I did indeed study and apply several different religions. You might recall that the scriptures do not say anything about what I did between the age of 12 and 30. I disappeared from the scriptures, and the reason is that I disappeared from Galilee. I went on a pilgrimage that took me far away from my birthplace. I went to Egypt and I went to the Far East. In both places, I studied and applied the mystical religions found there. In fact, there are historical records that document my travels to the East. I traveled to Persia, India, Tibet, and Kashmir. Wherever I went, I studied and practiced the local religion. However, true to my personality and mission, I did not follow the orthodox religion. I followed and applied the inner mystical version of the outer religion. In several places, I began to preach the same universal truth that I later preached in Galilee. In some places, the Orthodox priests would eventually attempt to silence me, and in several cases I had to flee for my life. India has a very old lineage of spiritual teachers or gurus. During my travels in that country, I did indeed meet a spiritual teacher who briefly served as my personal guru. He was part of an ancient tradition and lineage that stretches back untold millennia. This tradition originated with God, and it is meant to be the outpicturing on earth of a process that takes place in heaven. That process is the Guru-Chela relationship. When a new life stream is created, it is not simply left to its own devices. It is offered a gradual path that will lead it towards greater spiritual understanding and maturity. As part of that path, a life stream is offered a personal teacher or guru. Every life stream has a personal guru. Every human being on earth has a personal guru in the form of a spiritual teacher who resides in the spiritual world. Some people also meet an embodied spiritual teacher who serves as their personal guru on earth. However, many people do not need an outer guru. They need to discover their inner spiritual guru. India is one of the few places on earth where the physical extension of the Guru-Chela relationship has been preserved. Yet the idea of a spiritual teacher who teaches a number of students is a universal principle that reaches all the way back to God. I am part of that universal lineage. I serve as a personal guru for millions of life streams on this planet. There are other gurus, and therefore not every life stream on this planet is my personal student or Chela. Nevertheless, every human being is my disciple in the sense that they are meant to walk the path of personal Christhood, a path that I came to represent for all people on earth. I also hold a spiritual office as the representative of the universal Christ for all people on earth. Therefore, all human beings, no matter what outer religion they belong to, must pass through my sacred heart in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. The point I want to get across is that I see myself as belonging to a universal inner religion. I have no desire to tell you which outer religion you should or should not follow. However, I do have a desire to help you recognize the universal inner path behind all outer religions. I also want you to understand that in order to follow me, you do not have to be a member of an outer Christian church. Being my disciple, even being my personal Chela, is not an outer thing. I have disciples from every religion on earth. Strange as it may seem, I have many disciples who do not belong to any outer religion. I even have a few disciples who consider themselves to be atheists. Unfortunately, most of these disciples find it difficult to rise above a certain level of spiritual understanding. I hope you will open your mind and heart to the idea of a universal inner religion. If you will do so, you will discover the inner path. If you have the courage to follow that path, you will realize that religion is meant to be a personal walk with God. Religion is a path of self-discovery. Ultimately, that path will lead you to the discovery of your true self, the self that is God individualized.